Welcome to the Progress Texas Happy Hour.
All right, everybody, welcome back. Progress Texas Happy Hour. Communications Director Chris Mosier here, continuing our tour through the candidates who have earned our esteem for sure by becoming nominees for the Democratic side of the midterm coming up in November. A great many of whom we've gotten to know very, very well, including Houston's Jon Rosenthal, State Rep Jon Rosenthal. So glad to have you, Rep Rosenthal, and how you doing?
I'm doing good. Thanks so much for having me on your podcast today.
Absolutely. So coming to us from Houston, one thing I have noticed, we've done an increasingly regular amount of live events in Houston that Rep Rosenthal has graciously shown up for, which has been very nice. Your people love you there. When you walk up to a mic, you tend to get a very nice round of applause, at least in my experience so far. Tell us about Houston as a community there, especially perhaps the progressive folks there in Houston, the community from which you sprung into your political life. And one thing about Houston and Harris County, it's become, clearly, I think it's obvious to some, but perhaps not to others, how important Houston and Harris County are to the overall performance of Texas coming up in November.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and it's a great question. Houston is like either the third or fourth largest city in the United States of America, and more broadly, Harris County, which encompasses Houston and small towns, but basically the metropolitan area.
I actually looked that up. Houston's number 4 right now by my most recent data. And this is really interesting. Harris County is bigger in population than over half of the 50 United States. 26 states have less people in them than Harris County does, which is
That's
crazy.
right. So Harris County probably running about 4.7, 4.8 million people right now.
Yep.
It's the largest metropolitan area in the state of Texas. And for those who are not in Texas, it's kind of weird the way that things are set up here, because the city proper is one thing, but the what they call the unincorporated area, which is pretty much the suburban ring around the city, has as much or more population in it as the city proper. And so I represent a district that is completely unincorporated, meaning it's not part of the city limits.
Right.
And so its addresses are, Cypress, Katy, Houston. That's what they call them, but it's all unincorporated Harris County. Okay.
It's got a little bit of Wild Wild West going on out there, I would think, perhaps.
A little bit, yeah. So, we don't get city services, but we rely on the county seat, the county government for that stuff.
Right.
And significant political organization efforts have been happening out here, at least for quite a few cycles. And of course, when I got involved in politics, I was just working privately. In 2016, 2017, I became involved in politics as an anti-Trumper. And so I started out just by going to political club meetings and hanging out with some political activists who were at the time obviously protesting the Trump administration, protesting Senator Cornyn. Our local congressman for Congressional 7 was a total Trumper, and we were engaged in trying to, unseat him. And I started out as a political activist, and I started an indivisible group out here in Northwest Houston.
That's right.
And I like to think that we helped to get Lizzie Fletcher elected, and she was the one who beat John Culberson. And of course, this is very inside baseball. People don't even know who their own reps are, much less
frequently that's
else's.
Unfortunately the case.
But given that I started in community, and then I decided to run, obviously towards the end of 2017, and then in 2018 we had the campaign and won.
Right.
So since then, I have made it kind of the highest priority for my office. For me personally, I want to be the kind of representative that I would want to have representing me. And so that means showing up in community, supporting the causes that the people I serve, feel strongly about. And that's why, It's not like a whole lot of people know my name, but that's why when we walk into political spaces, I have already been there for them time and time again, cycle in, cycle out. And even when my election isn't competitive, I still raise and spend money to get out the vote in the district and continue the work of organizing. That's how we replaced our Cy-Fair school district board.
That's right. Famously so. Very cool.
Very cool stuff. And so it still floors me every time I walk into a room and a bunch of people know who I am. It's kind of cool. But I mean, it goes both ways. We work together. I serve the people, and it's their desires that really carry my agenda.
I mean, think about, the contrast between what you just said and what we see with a lot of Republican elected officials really at the same level where you are, the state reps who don't dare show their faces in public for fear of being shouted down. I mean, this is kind of where we are. That's the contrast between the two parties at this point. So Rep. Rosenthal, I don't think I've mentioned yet, which is kind of silly, is of course the Democratic nominee for Texas Railroad Commission. And we can go into that a little bit, but I want to also note Rep. Rosenthal, another parallel that I think is, definitely obvious to you and perhaps to a growing number of people. The results of the Republican runoff clearly was a MAGA overrunning of that party, most pointedly evidenced by the nomination of Ken Paxton for U.S. Senate. But the Texas Railroad Commission race, which would be very much a sleeper in any other cycle, pretty much. It's one of those by intent, by the fact that they call it the Railroad Commission, and it's got nothing to do with choo-choos. It's all about energy. This is a particular job that has been kept in the obscurity area, but kind of by design, over the last, several decades. So the fact that you have drawn Beau French as a Republican opponent in this particular race, to people who know, this is almost, dare I say, this is more egregious in terms of a technically unqualified candidate who is in this place simply because of his demonstrative MAGA nature, simply because of the fact that he is a bomb thrower and a troublemaker, a shit stirrer, shall we say? I mean, that really is who he is, and that's how he made his bones as the head of the Tarrant County Republican Party. And so
that's right.
The guy's got very, very little business in this job. Let me take you over my rambling when it comes to Beau French. It's really, to me, knowing what I know about him and about you and about this job, it's just completely shocking and striking.
Yeah, no kidding, right? So this person, I actually hadn't heard of him before until last year. As the chairman of the Republican Party of Tarrant County, and Tarrant County, of course, is Fort Worth
right
area. So as the party chairman for his county, he posted an online poll asking who's a bigger threat to America, Muslims or Jews?
Yeah.
And
let that sink in. Holy cow,
right?
And in one shot, you have completely alienated two completely different, just amazing.
So what's interesting is that the lieutenant governor of the state, Dan Patrick, denounced him for that poll, called for his resignation. Of course, he didn't resign, although Patrick supported Jim Wright, the incumbent, against Beau French, as did all the elected officials. And this is something we should probably talk about in just a second. While all of them, down the line, the mainstream ones at least, were supporting the incumbent.
Right. Jim Wright. And we're talking Greg Abbott. We're talking Dan Patrick. We're talking
Greg Abbott, Dan Patrick, Dustin Burrows, the Speaker of the Texas House, the other members of the Railroad Commission, because there are three commissioners.
Right.
And so Wayne.
Nobody wanted this guy. Nobody wanted Beau French.
Nobody wanted him. Industry lobbied against him. And I mean, Exxon and Chevron funneled like close to $1 million into a PAC of either supporting Jim Wright or opposing Beau French, because everyone knows he has no business in this kind of role. It should not be ideological role, but waging a campaign based on, racism and xenophobia and just hate filled narratives. And to be clear, like when I call him out for racist rhetoric or anti-Semitic things that he has said, when others have called him out, like online, and just boldly called him a racist, he just acknowledges that he is. He just says yes. So he's a proud racist.
It's a stock and trade of his. And before we move on from Beau French, I have another one of his greatest hits that I would like to lay out there. He has famously suggested, I think at some CPAC type conference or somewhere, that we should deport 100 million people from the United States, which mathematically would have to include native-born citizens if he's done his proper math.
If anyone does the proper math, whether less than half of that number are immigrants of any kind, whether they're naturalized or here legal residents or undocumented. That sum total of all of those is probably 30 to 40 million.
Right.
And so you're looking at 50, 60, maybe more than 60 million native-born American citizens that he wants to deport just because they don't look like him or think like him.
And so he's either done this math and that what you just said, Rep. Rosenthal, is his intent, or he hasn't done the math and he's just merely spouting things to rile up racist people, to rile up the MAGA base. And here he is, the nominee. It's clearly worked.
So, and with no industry background. So he claims to have done work in energy trading. His mother has a small oil company. So,
see, I did want to ask that. I know he has some degree of oil experience. The Railroad Commission, to me, has become known, and you're the technical expert here, so I'm asking you really, but to me, it's become known as a position by which, at least indirectly, these commissioners can enrich themselves. They have control over policies that involve, clearly the oil industry, the energy industry, of which many of them are directly involved in ownership capacity or investor capacity. So to me, that almost seems like that's why Beau French would be interested in being on this commission, outside of just a step up to wherever he intends to go, would be some form of corruption, some form of grift.
It's certainly possible. He doesn't have any direct industry experience. So I could say my father was a professor of mathematics. That does not qualify me to walk into a room full of professors and start talking math, right?
Right.
I would be lost on day one. And I imagine I don't know if he's ever set foot on an actual drilling rig, but I have decades of experience with rigs and platforms and all of that. The interesting thing here is, with Dan Patrick, who had denounced him, and, I'm currently running social media ads showing a rally where the governor of the state of Texas calls him a threat to the Texas Miracle because he doesn't know anything about oil and gas.
Right.
And the days after winning the primary, Governor Abbott then endorses him. So what it tells you about their party, their elected officials and their party leadership, is that they don't care about competence. They don't care actually about the citizens. They don't care even about the health of the oil and gas industry, which is, the economic backbone of Texas. They care more about partisan party politics and their tribalism than any of those things.
I'm going to sidetrack for just a second here. I finally got around to watching Chernobyl, the miniseries Chernobyl, just within the last few days. And that's been around for a long time.
Yeah.
But what struck me, what I didn't expect out of that, was a pretty close examination of an energy sector safety situation that went awry straight up from incompetence that was based on the wrong people being in these very important jobs based on their party loyalty. It's exactly what you're talking about, and so, on a more macro sort of scale, you're absolutely right. After, just mere days ago, campaigning against people like Beau French, the Republican apparatchik is now, backing who they assume to be the people who are going to be able to keep their party in control. And it's really about that, not about knowing what they're doing.
Well, at least for the sort of political party bosses, that is the truth.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so what I'll be seeking to do in this campaign is I'm going to stake out the middle ground. I'm the one that will actually be healthy for the industry and work to protect the environment at the same time. And that is something I think we can totally do. It's like, the more responsible operators do it already. But it is my intention to go talk to the people in rural adjacent areas, whether they're Republicans or just, right-leaning voters, as a lot of those populations are. They're concerned about the environment in places where it's just become so toxic over time that it's in their faces. I was in the Permian Basin a couple of weeks ago, and they had they lost containment on a well that had been plugged, since the 1930s, but noxious, oily, chemical laden poison water flooded the only church in Great Falls, Texas.
Oh, wow.
And this 1950s structure, it's hard to imagine that they'll be able to clean it up to the point where they can have services in it again. But the water came up through the church, flooded the parking lot, turned into a little pond out there. And so the people of Great Falls, while probably overwhelmingly Republican leaning, are very concerned that the oil and gas industry is allowed to just scoop up this water and re-inject it. So you've lost containment on an injection well or whatever it is. When it comes up in the middle of your town and destroys your church, it doesn't matter if you're a Republican or a Democrat. You just want someone to be responsible about regulating that kind of thing.
Absolutely. What a story that is. So kind of along the lines of what we're talking about here, there is definitely a hard choice to be made on the Republican side coming up in November. People who see the corruption and the grift and the incompetence and this party loyalty thing, this MAGA thing that starts with Trump and trickles all the way down. That versus running things the way they ought to be run, and basic safety and basic responsibility. And so there are a lot of folks, especially, and we've kind of put them in the lane of John Cornyn voters, shall we say, in the runoff, people who are going to have to decide what to do coming up in November. Rep. Rosenthal, you've already kind of started on this track, but tell me about what you would say to a disaffected Cornyn voter who you've just met, who doesn't know much about you. What's your line to that person in terms of why it's important to buck the party line and go with someone who, actually has some expertise when it comes to the Texas Railroad Commission?
So perfect question. And I want to frame this a little bit broader. So not just the Cornyn voter, how about all the voters that voted for Jim Wright? Okay. So in the primary runoff, especially when you look at the map of how that played out, the folks who are in the oil and gas or energy producing regions of our state voted more for the incumbent than for this uprising guy.
How close was it? How close was that count? I don't have that handy.
It was like the margin of victory was 1%, 1.2%.
Okay. Well, then in this case, Jim Wright's a better example than John Cornyn, really, at this point.
So yeah, it's not 2/3, 1/3 like you saw with Ken Paxton.
Right.
And John Cornyn. This is one where in the primary runoff, it seems like the people who know what this agency does and the importance of it did vote for Jim Wright. And it was a very narrow victory. It was late in the night by the time they called it. It might have been early in the wee morning hours, as they say. But I want to appeal to those folks, because if you're concerned about the economy of Texas, the Texas miracle, if you're concerned about your, energy industry jobs, if you're concerned about keeping the lights on in the state the next time there's a winter freeze, all that is hinged on the Railroad Commission and the regulation of oil and gas, particularly natural gas and pipelines. That was the root cause of our winter storm. So you're in Texas. Every time there's a winter freeze warning, don't you get worried?
Oh, God, yes.
You're
absolutely.
Still traumatized. My power out was out here for like 8 days. And then when it came back on, I had a blowout in the wall right behind me.
Oh, Lord.
Because we had a pipe break.
Right.
Even though I insulated them.
There's only so much you can do.
But that's the thing, is people are traumatized about that. They want our grid to be more reliable.
Yeah.
And there's no reason why the top energy producing state in the United States of America should be worried about the lights going out every time a storm moves in.
Right.
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 So I want to talk about those things. I want to talk about an all of the above approach to energy production. So while oil and gas is the backbone of our economy and our energy infrastructure, we should be encouraging investments in wind and solar, geothermal, hydrogen, and even nuclear. In this state, we run very close to the capacity of the limit of our generation capacity on very hot days, on very cold days. And in a state where, people are debating whether we want to encourage or discourage, data centers and AI business from coming in, while I'm not going to pass a moral judgment, if you don't plan for the resources, for the water and the power, then you're going to be SOL. In the oil field, we used to say shit out of luck when you don't have it together. But we need responsible policy that's thoughtful on these things and works with both industry and communities. And so that's the pitch that I'll make to the voters.
I did want to drag you in that direction, actually, and you've already gone there. We've just learned about Sid Miller, of all people, whom, when I bring up Texas Agriculture Commissioner Sid Miller, I like to point out that he's also a Western wear enthusiast and wears it very well. He has been primaried out. He's in this YOLO group, the You Only Lose Once group at this point. He's on his way out. And so he's kind of free to say whatever he wants to say. And he has started to kind of cozy up a little bit to Clayton Tucker, who's the Democratic nominee for his own job at this point.
Right.
And one of the easy, commonalities, points of agreement that they've arrived to that appears to be a growing area that Republicans and Democrats, progressives and conservatives can generally agree on is this whole thing about data centers, whether that's about farmland. And that's something that I think has been lost a little bit in the conversation. Everybody's talking about electricity. Everybody's talking about water. These data centers happen to be largely couched in rural areas and are more and more frequently parked on land that could be better used for farming or ranching. So go there with us. What's your take on data centers in general? And what would your role on the Texas Railroad Commission? Would there be a direct impact on that sector from your position on that board?
So probably I'll start backwards. So the direct impact is probably pretty small. Like they're not going to ask for drilling or mining permits. When they want water, they'll go to their municipalities.
Right.
So while I may not be in a position to directly regulate these things, I'll be a hell of a lobbyist in Austin.
Yeah.
Because first, I know all the legislators, or I know all the ones that are there now, but I also know how to talk to them.
Right.
And let me just tell you the message that I'll carry, as one of the first ever elected Democrats elected statewide, I'll just go in and say, y'all screwed this up so bad, you're getting Democrats elected. And if you don't moderate on policy and actually serve the people instead of the big money interests, we're going to come for more of your seats. And whether those are legislative seats or statewide seats, agency seats, whatever it is, the thing that sadly makes them perk up and pay attention is when you threaten their power base.
Right.
Because
right.
Seems to be all a lot of them care about is getting and keeping and building power. So starting from there, the very first thing I would advocate for in this state is some amount of local control. If you want to build any industrial something in an area, you should go to the people there. You should go to the city council, the commissioner, county commissioner's court. You should probably get the okay of the people. And if that's what it takes, then you need to make your case to the people about how you're a benefit to the community instead of just a draw on their resources and a suck on their farmland and incidentally a heat vent to the environment.
That's right. That's right too. And did we even talk about the fact that AI is supposed to run everybody out of their job at some point? I mean,
we haven't, but that's a real threat. So working families around the state can get concerned about stuff like that, and particularly certain types of jobs, right?
Yeah, I got a couple of fresh college graduates who definitely have that on their minds for sure. Always a great talk with you, Rep. Rosenthal. We're coming up towards the end. Do give me real quick your generalized elevator pitch for yourself, where you come from, why you're running, and why we should vote for you coming up this fall.
Again, I'm Jon Rosenthal. I'm actually a career mechanical engineer, spent the bulk of my adult life working in oil field industry. And then I ran for office, and now I'm a 4-term state rep. So I'm the only person maybe ever to run for this job that has both industry and technical experience and legislative government experience. And with that, you can rely on me to serve the people of Texas and your interests in all the ways. So the first way is to make sure that we preserve and advance good paying jobs for Texas families. We want to make sure that we're responsible about water and power usage in this state. We want our power grid to be more reliable. We want to bring down our electric bills. We didn't even talk about how Winter Storm Uri has caused all of our electric bills.
That's right. The Abbott tax, as they say.
But yeah, spread the word, because this race does tend to fly under the radar. It's called the Railroad Commission from the 1800s.
Yeah.
In modern times, it has nothing to do with trains. It's all about oil and gas. So if you want someone responsible who will work for you and be a technical expert on that commission, plus the best damn lobbyist you have ever seen in Austin, Texas, I'm your guy. JonRosenthalTX.com.
He's running for the Texas Railroad Commission. State Rep Jon Rosenthal of Harris County. Thank you so much for hanging out. Always a pleasure, and we'll follow your adventures over the next few months.
Awesome. Stay tuned. This is going to be a wild ride.